The story begins in the bustling, scholarly atmosphere of Hamburg, where Professor Otto Lidenbrock, a man whose intellect is matched only by his restless, almost manic energy, discovers something that will change everything. He finds a 12th century Icelandic manuscript containing a runic cryptograph, a puzzle that defies immediate understanding. His nephew, Axel, serves as our narrator and the cautious, often terrified voice of reason in the story. While the professor sees a grand scientific mystery, Axel sees only the danger of the unknown. Eventually, Axel manages to crack the code, revealing a message left by a 16th century alchemist named Arne Saknussemm. The message provides instructions for a journey into the very heart of the earth, accessible through the crater of the Sneffels volcano in Iceland, specifically at a moment when the shadow of the mountain Skartaris points the way. Despite Axel's protests that the Earth's interior must be a furnace of unbearable heat, Lidenbrock's obsession wins out. The expedition is formed, the driven professor, the reluctant Axel, and Hans Bjelke, a stoic, nearly expressionless Icelandic guide who becomes the physical anchor for the group. Their journey takes them to the rugged landscapes of Iceland, where they begin the grueling ascent of the Sneffels volcano. They wait for the precise astronomical alignment, and when the shadow falls, they descend into the crater. They find a stone pedestal that confirms Saknussemm's path, and their descent into the dark begins. As they move deeper, the adventure shifts from a scientific expedition into a desperate struggle for survival. The geology they encounter defies everything they were taught in textbooks. Instead of increasing heat, they find a temperate, almost luminous environment. They eventually emerge into a vast subterranean world, a massive central sea, lit by strange atmospheric phenomena. They build a raft and set sail across this internal ocean, encountering creatures that should have been extinct for millions of years. They see blind, prehistoric fish and witness a titanic, terrifying battle between a plesiosaurus and an ichthyosaurus. This is the moment where the scale of the world shifts from the human to the monumental. Their voyage across the sea is fraught with peril. They encounter a volcanic island and are caught in a violent electrical storm that leaves them adrift and disoriented. A subsequent storm drives their raft in a massive, dizzying circle, eventually washing them up on a new, unknown shore of the Central Sea. It is here that the tone of the adventure takes a darker, more existential turn. They discover a prehistoric cemetery filled with the bones of ancient animals, and among them, they find something far more unsettling, a remarkably well-preserved human corpse. This discovery introduces a terrifying possibility, that they are not the only humans in this abyss, and that life might exist in the deep in ways they cannot comprehend. The group eventually finds Saknussemm's signature on a granite tablet, which confirms they are on the right path. In an attempt to clear a rock obstruction, they use gunpowder to blast through the stone, but the explosion triggers a catastrophic chain reaction. The blast causes the inland sea to flood into a massive fissure, creating a violent high-speed subterranean torrent. Their raft is caught in the flood, and they are propelled through a dark, chaotic descent. They lose most of their supplies, facing extreme hunger and thirst as they are swept through the bowels of the planet. The climax of the journey is not a controlled scientific discovery, but a moment where human ingenuity is completely overwhelmed by the raw, salvaging power of the earth. The raft is caught in a violent upward current caused by a massive volcanic eruption. This eruption acts like a giant natural elevator, tossing the raft through a storm of fire, ash, and sulfurous gas. They are propelled upward through the crust, eventually being ejected from a volcanic crater into the Mediterranean Sea near the island of Stromboli. They emerge from the sea, exhausted and battered, but alive. They return to Hamburg as world-renowned explorers, having proven that a prehistoric world once existed beneath our feet, though the mystery of why their compasses acted so strangely during the descent remains a lingering, unexplained testament to the forces of the deep. When we look back at this story, it is easy to see why Jules Verne's work became a cornerstone of science fiction. One of the most fascinating aspects of the book is how it handles the concept of deep time. In the mid-19th century, the idea of geological time was still being wrestled with by the public. By placing his characters in a world where they can see, touch, and even witness the combat of prehistoric creatures, Verne takes the abstract, terrifyingly vast timeline of Earth's history and makes it a tangible, lived experience. It's no longer just a series of layers in a rock, it's a breathing, moving ecosystem. There is also a compelling tension between scientific dogma and empirical observation throughout the narrative. Professor Lidenbrock represents the scientific establishment of his time. He relies heavily on the established theories of his era, including the idea that the Earth's interior must be a molten furnace. However, the reality they encounter, the temperate air, the luminous atmosphere, the existence of a sea, constantly contradicts the scientific models they brought with them. This creates a recurring theme where the characters, and by extension the reader, must abandon preconceived notions to accept the actual, often stranger, reality of the world. This leads us to the concept of the sublime, a major theme in 19th century literature. The sublime is that specific feeling of being overwhelmed by something so vast and powerful that it is simultaneously beautiful and terrifying. We see this clearly in the description of the Central Sea and the battle between the prehistoric monsters. The characters are dwarfed by the scale of the landscapes and the ancient power of the creatures they encounter. It's a reminder of the insignificance of man when faced with the immense, indifferent forces of nature. This brings us to the central conflict of the book, man versus nature. Throughout the journey, the characters attempt to use human technology, ropes, rafts, gunpowder, and scientific instruments to master their environment. Yet, every time they think they have gained control, the Earth responds with a force that renders their tools useless. The gunpowder meant to clear a path ends up triggering a flood. The raft meant for navigation becomes a piece of debris in a volcanic eruption. Ultimately, they don't conquer the center of the Earth, they are simply allowed to pass through it. Looking at the characters, we see a perfect triad for exploring these themes. And Lidenbrock is the drive, the obsessive pursuit of truth that ignores personal safety. Axel is the human element, the fear and the doubt that makes the journey feel grounded and real. And Hans is the stability, the professional competence that keeps the group moving when the professor's passion and Axel's fear might otherwise lead to paralysis. Verne's work was written during a period of intense geological discovery, and while some of the science, like the specific geochemical models of the time, has been superseded by modern geology, the spirit of the book remains incredibly potent. It's a story about the hunger for knowledge and the realization that the world is far larger and more mysterious than our current maps suggest. Even though we now know the center of the Earth is a solid and liquid core of immense heat and pressure, Verne's vision of a hidden living world continues to capture the imagination because it speaks to that fundamental human urge to look beneath the surface and discover what lies hidden in the dark.